Alrighty, good morning everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mixed Martial Arts. My name is Austin Shaper. This is going to be the very first episode about UFC. If you've seen anything I've posted so far, you probably know at this point that I cover three topics on this show. We talk about UAP/the UFO phenomenon. We talk about World War III, geopolitical news, and the UFC segments I'm excited about because, one, it's my favorite sport. It's the only sport I watch at all. But on top of that, a lot of the things we talk about in the fields of the UFO stuff and geopolitical, it's not always the most positive, uplifting type of stuff. The world has gone mad, so there's a lot of crazy news we've been covering and just a whole lot on a more serious note. So I'm excited to do these episodes that are a little more lighthearted and just about a fun sport that I'm obsessed with and have been obsessed with for quite a number of years. I really started consistently watching UFC and really got bit by the UFC bug, consuming all the podcasts, watching every card, going back in time, watching the old cards, all that, probably in 2016. So what is that, almost 7 years ago now? So I'm obsessed, you can say that. And this isn't going to be a show really where I'm doing like recaps of full cards or like technical breakdowns. There's plenty of great creators out there, professionals such as Luke Thomas and Anik and Bisping's podcast, Chael, et cetera, the list goes on, of people who you can go to for that. This is more for other enthusiasts, people who are obsessed as I am with the sport and they like to just talk about it. So we are going to cover some current cards because why wouldn't you? But I'm not going to break down all the cards or give you guys some technical stuff. And I love to tell people this at the beginning of every episode because I think it's important to say I am not an authority. I'm not an expert or some voice to go to for anything. I have no high seat and high ground in this at all. These are just topics that I love talking about. I could talk about them all day, and they just light me up. So that's why we do it. Diving into this one, I'm going to keep it relatively short today just because I got a lot of shit to do. I may look a little sleepy because it's only 9 in the morning right now on Sunday. I'm going to try to have this episode out by Monday morning. So this morning I woke up and I watched the main event of Cannonier and Marvin Vettori, and I did not get a chance to watch the whole card. One thing about these cards happening so frequently now, these ESPN cards and doing them at the Apex, there's good things and bad things to them. But from my perspective, it kind of makes you a little more casual unless you're diving into every single card because a lot of the cards are a little weaker. And that's not to say they don't end up being barn burners because there's plenty of cards that you sleep on and then you go back and you're like, man, there's a lot of good fights on this card. But that being said, they can be a little watered down as far as like name recognition and talent goes. I think that I heard yesterday that there is a card every Saturday for the next 4 months. So on one hand, it's great to be able to get UFC every single Saturday. The downside of that is that some of the cards are a little more watered down, and obviously that means there's opportunity to discover talent you have not known about previously. But the only catch to that is, personally, I prefer to have a card that's just stacked, and even if we had to wait once a month for that, that would be something that gets me more excited when you see a whole main card in prelims that you're just like, every card is fire, or every fight is fire on this card. This wasn't the case. I did hear that there's a couple, that would be my old cat Boots. He loves going off once I start recording. But I heard that there was a couple fights I need to go back and watch on this one. But alas, I did not get the chance to yet. But we're going to dive into Marvin versus Cannonier first. I thought it was a great fight. I just watched it about 30 minutes ago. I did think that my prediction was that this was going to go to decision, but I was leaning towards Marvin. I thought that his striking has been improving, and I really did think that his grappling was going to be kind of the difference maker. If you know anything about his record, he only really loses to the elite of the elite, and he has 9 submissions on his record, I believe. So I thought that he was going to utilize that, and I found it to be very interesting that he didn't. He basically just stood there in front of Jared the entire time. Cannonier is another one of those guys that seems to just lose to the best of the best. The Izzy fight, Marvin facing Izzy twice, And I don't like to say gatekeeper in a negative way because I think a gatekeeper is an important role. I think it's like these guys kind of drift around the top 5 and it's hard to get past them, but they get stumped by the absolute top of the food chain, such as Whitaker and Izzy. That's not to say they couldn't eventually fight for the belt again, but I don't see them beating either one of them beating the champ. So I was a little excited for this fight. I wasn't going to miss it. I never miss a Marvin fight, and I never miss a Jared fight, but I wasn't like overly excited about either of these guys' style. That being said, it was a great fight. I did think it was going to go to decision. I just thought Marvin's grappling was going to come into play, especially in the later rounds, and for whatever reason, that's not how it played out. You guys know, especially if you listen to Chao's podcast, pretty much it doesn't matter if you're an expert voice in this or not. You never know how fighting is going to go. You just never know, and that's why we love the sport. But right off the bat, watching that first round, it was fireworks right off the bat, and Jared got rocked twice in the first round. Marvin was putting the pressure on, and I thought Jared came out with a really good game plan because he was standing southpaw and he was kicking that lead leg of Vettori, obviously to slow him down from the pressure because Marvin's always pressing forward. It didn't work, and I thought this was an interesting development because you saw in this fight Jared, his ability to adjust during the fight. You know, his defense was not there and he kept getting clipped. That's how he got rocked twice, was in southpaw in the first round. And he was able to switch it up, whereas Vettori, it's like he kind of just commits to his game plan and that's that. There was virtually no head movement from him. And he did have his moments. He got his licks in, no doubt. But at the same time, it's like at this high of a level, if you can't adjust, if you have a game plan and you come out and you realize it's not going to go according to plan, you got to be able to adjust, right? And it seemed like Marvin did not have that ability whatsoever. So I believe Jared reached he broke the record in the middleweight division for significant strikes at, I want to say 249. So crazy that there wasn't a single knockdown. I saw people saying fight of the year. I think that's just like recency bias. I don't see that as fight of the year at all. There wasn't even a single knockdown. No one really got too close to being finished. That being said, it was a great fight. Marvin seemed to be like headstrong. That's kind of always how he is, but he has been developing recently, and I thought he was going to do better. I thought he was going to use head movement, footwork. He didn't really use any of that. He kept going right into Jared's power. He was circling into his power, kept getting clipped. He had his moments, as I said. He landed on Jared plenty of times, but Jared pieced him up, man, and it makes you wonder where does Jared go from here, because granted, Marvin's fought Izzy twice. Jared's only fought Izzy once, but I don't see that fight going any different. Matter of fact, if Jared fought Izzy again, I think it's more likely that Izzy finishes him the second time. So it's one of those interesting situations where you're drifting around the top of the division. You've already faced the champ and lost. Where do you go from here? So I don't really know who he would fight. Possibly the loser of Whitaker and Duplessis whenever that goes down. I forget the date. Potentially that's coming up on the 290 card in July. I'd have to double check that, but don't really know where he goes from here. But I did think it was a crazy fight. It was crazy that there was no knockdowns, and good Lord, does Marvin have a chin. That dude I don't think he's ever been knocked out, at least to my knowledge. He's got a crazy chin, and while that does come to your advantage, I also think it kind of puts him in survival mode where he was kind of just, at the beginning, he was pressuring and putting it on Jared, and then throughout the rest of the fight, he's kind of just backing up and eating shots, zero head movement, and while he's not getting knocked down, he goes from trying to win the fight to then just trying to survive the fight. So those are my thoughts on it. We'll read a couple reactions about it because it was a good fight, and I keep seeing that there's a couple other ones on the beginning of the main card that I'm going to have to go back and check out. So I'm sorry if that sounds casual to you guys, but I just got a lot going on right now. So I haven't been missing any of the big pay-per-views, but sometimes with these ESPN cards, especially if they're on late, like 10 at night is when this one started Eastern time, I have to go back and check it out. It takes me a couple days, and then you get them spoiled on Twitter and Instagram, so that's wonderful. Marcus on TikTok about the fight said, good fight, but both will never wear the belt. Yeah, hard to say never, but I don't know if I disagree. I think that if Izzy moves up, he beats whoever, Whitaker or Duplessis, whoever wins that fight, and he wins again, I can see Izzy going up, especially if Pereira beats Jan. That's a big task, but for the purpose of drama and just what would be exciting for the fans, I would love for Pereira to beat Jan at 205 and then go up beat Jamal for the belt. Two giant tasks, but if he did, Izzy said he would go up to 205 and have a UFC trilogy for the belt. That would be best case scenario. Ripper Magu says Absolute War, fight of the year. Not fight of the year, not even close. There's been some great fights this year, but it was a good fight. Very good. Bet With Me says put some respect on Jared's name. Dude is 39 and just put out more output than any other middleweight in history, let alone going down 2 weight classes. Yeah, crazy. If you guys don't know this, Jared started off at heavyweight, then went down to light heavyweight. Now he's at middleweight, looking sculpted as all get out. 39 years old, yeah, I guess that's relatively old in the middleweight division, and he's still breaking records, so it's crazy. Pro Ball Buster says Marvin said it, win or lose, it would be an entertaining fight. Definitely it was that. I was just surprised he didn't use the grappling, man. It just blew my mind. I'm like, it's right there. You know, you've got that advantage over Jared, and Jared ended up taking Marvin down at least, I think, 2 times closer to the end of the fight. So things just rarely pan out the way you would think in UFC, and that's why I freaking love it. 0 knockdowns is crazy. ... This is literally his username. ... Said 0 knockdowns is crazy. Thought that was insane too, and it just speaks to both of their chins. They got iron chins, which is a good thing, but I think it can work against you, and you saw that from Marvin's perspective. Mountain Man 69 says Marvin. God, these usernames on TikTok or something else, huh? Says Marvin should ditch the striking game and move to Dagestan. He must not keep up with Marvin's record very much, or his fights, because Marvin's got grappling. I don't think he should ditch the striking. I think his striking is improving. I think it's very technical. I just think he's missing some of the defense, and he's missing a lot of the footwork. And like I said, the ability to adjust if things aren't going your way. Clayton Gillespie says first dude to make Marvin Vettori bleed. Don't think that's true. Yeah, he was leaking out of his nose like a faucet, wasn't he, near the end of the fight? But I don't think that's true. I'm pretty sure he's been sliced open a couple times. Cute says these two belong in Bellator. No, I wouldn't say that. Gosh, these guys are brutal out here, these fans. It's like if you're not champion or fighting the champion, people think you ought to move to Bellator. I disagree. I think these guys are in the top 10, top 5 for a reason. And gatekeeper's not a bad thing, in my opinion. It's very hard to reach the belt. Very few people do it. And if we had such a high standard that we say that unless you're basically going for the belt or you have the belt, you need to go to a different organization, man, there'd be no one to fight. There'd be no contenders. So, stupid opinion there from Cute. Dr. Mara says, crazy fight and 249 significant strikes. So crazy. 249 significant strikes, and Marvin ate it like it was nothing, didn't get knocked down a single time. So I'm going to go back and watch the rest of the card when I get a chance. I did hear there were some barn burners, so we'll see. I wasn't too hyped on this card. That's why I wasn't pressed to watch it last night when I got off work. That pretty much covers Marvin versus Kennedy, I would say. Now, a couple things that I wanted to talk about, just because I haven't been able to post anything about UFC. This is my first video as far as mixed martial arts goes. Cyril Gane versus Sergey Spivak got scheduled. I don't know the date, but it did get put on the books, which no one really saw that coming. We all thought it was going to be Sergey versus John Jones was the talk that you were hearing. Chael even said that fight was signed, and disappointed me. I do really appreciate Sergey's skills. I think he's got 6 first-round knockouts right now in a row. So, yeah, that man needs to fight for the belt. And that's a great fight for John Jones. But what's weird about it is that, Jones was trying to get the Stipe fight. And as far as legacy goes, that's the fight that we want to see, right? We want to see the best heavyweight champ of all time in Stipe fighting the new heavyweight champ in John Jones, the greatest of all time. I think most people had Jones for that fight. For whatever reason, it hasn't panned out. I've been keeping up with that news a lot, and I can't figure out why. It's like Stipe's training. He looks healthy. John Jones is healthy, calling for the fight. You hear Chael speculating about it. Who's not signing? He said it was Stipe. We never got to the bottom of it. But when we saw this fight get scheduled with Cyril Gane and Sergey, first thing I thought was, okay, good fight. Cyril Gane's amazing. I don't think he's going to get knocked out in the first. That dude's got a chin, and he's got crazy striking. And I think that's an interesting matchup versus Sergey. But it's funny because when I saw that, my first thing was like, okay, cool. Now I'm excited for potentially that means John Jones is fighting Stipe. But then plot twist, you go on Instagram and you see that Tyson Fury supposedly got a deal sent to him by the UFC to be able to do some sort of hybrid fight with John Jones. What on earth? I have no idea how that would work. If Tyson Fury was going to come and fight John Jones, it's just got to be in the octagon. That's the way it's got to be, in my opinion. But the shitty thing about that is, and obviously Fury knows this. He's going to get taken down, submitted, probably faster than even Gon did in the first round. It's not even competitive. So a hybrid fight between Tyson Fury and Jon Jones, I don't know what that even looks like, especially if you do it in the UFC. We know Dana White's not going to let Jon go to boxing or go to some other organization to do that hybrid fight. I don't even think the numbers would justify doing that. It's not like it's a McGregor Mayweather situation. I kind of hope that's fake news because I really wanted to see Jon Jones fight Stipe, and if he won, I would love to see him retire. Perfect way to end the career. I think he could end it right now and definitely be the greatest of all time, but at the same time, as he moved up to fight for a vacant belt in the heavyweight, because Francis leaving, you wanted to see him fight the actual champ, former champ, in Stipe. So my first thoughts seeing Cyril Gane versus Sergey, I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe Jon Jones is fighting Stipe. I think maybe Stipe got the message. He's like, damn, they're going to pass me up. I got to take this fight. Stipe's not scared. I don't believe that. He's fought Francis twice, but it does make you wonder what's going on, what's taking so long. When Jon Jones finished this fight, finished the last fight with Cyril Gane, him and Stipe were talking immediately on Twitter back and forth, and both of them said they were ready. Here we are, 3-4 months later, no fight signed. Interesting. I'm open to hearing conspiracies about that. And typically we all go to jail for the conspiracies, and he hasn't really said much about what the reasoning behind Stipe not signing that fight is. Interesting times. You got Max versus Korean Zombie scheduled at 145. Max did say this is going to be his last fight at 145, and then he's going up to lightweight. I think that's probably the right move because he's not going to get a fourth fight with Volk ever. And I think we pretty much clearly saw that Volk was the one getting better in all three of those fights, which just speaks to the level of Volkanovski because Max is just a dog, man. Anytime you see him fight, I think that obviously he's going to be the favorite here in the Korean Zombie fight, but anytime you see him fight somebody not named Alexander Volkanovski, he is fucking him up every single time. That Arnold Allen fight that he just had a few months back, that was a crazy fight. It was competitive, but you saw Max take over, and I think he even knocked Arnold down in the last 5 seconds. So Max Holloway's crazy. I'm looking forward to the Korean Zombie fight, but at the same time, I think you got a heavily favorite Max, and I see that being a dominant performance by him. Korean Zombie's past his prime, I believe, and while Max potentially could be past his prime, I think it's another one of those guys who's at the very, very tip-top of the division, and in a way, he's a gatekeeper in a good way. You saw Aljamain complaining recently about having to take this O'Malley fight in August with such a quick turnaround, and I agree. I agreed with him. I know a lot of people hate on Aljo, but how can you expect a champion to turn around in 3 months? He beat Cejudo, and that was a crazy fight. I really thought that I did favorite Aljamain in that fight, but at the same time, I thought that Cejudo definitely had a chance. And to see him dominate Cejudo in that way, it was competitive, and I know some people even thought Cejudo won, mainly being Cejudo. But for him to turn around that quickly after a 5-round war like that, I thought that was ridiculous by Dana, and I think this probably ties back to the stringent requirements with ESPN and all these partners they work with. They want these big cards, and they want a champion, they want a title fight at the top of every single card. And so that probably puts this unneeded pressure on the champions to make quick turnarounds unless they have some catastrophic injury they need to have surgery with. And Aljo turned it down at first, and he said yes. Then he weirdly said, okay, let's do July instead. And Sean O'Malley was like, what? No, we're doing August. I think that in hindsight, Aljo's going to look back and really regret taking this fight in August. If he loses to O'Malley, which is very possible, I think he's going to really regret taking this quick turnaround. I know the pressure's on him from both the fan base and the UFC brass to take the fight. I think it's a bad idea. I think you got to wait. At least give yourself a couple more months. And the UFC's just got to have patience. The UFC can't just make their champs turn around. You're going to wear them down. And then when they lose, they're going to be resentful to you for forcing them to have such a quick turnaround, not giving them the time to recover and recoup. So I kind of hope that fight gets postponed, truthfully, just so that we know that Aljo is at his best and O'Malley's at his best. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see a guy who's tired still and not fully recovered take another fight just so that we can get a title fight on the books. That leads to the BMF belt. Like I said, these guys have to have a title fight on every single pay-per-view, which I find to be unnecessary, and there's not enough champions. Opens you up to the conversation of why is there not more weight classes. if you're forced to do these title fights on every single pay-per-view, it only leads you to the conclusion that, okay, maybe we need some more weight classes then. So then there's more champions available and ready and giving more guys a shot. But that's not the way they're going. UFC makes some odd decisions, but we're fans nonetheless. For the Pereira-Yan fight coming up, I think it's a terrible fight at 205 for Pereira. Not saying that he couldn't win. He definitely could win. But you saw Izzy and Yan, was it early last year, something like that, when Izzy went up for the belt and lost. And you basically didn't see Yan as just necessarily too much of a better fighter. I think that size and that weight difference and the grappling really played into it. And Izzy's a good grappler. So if you put Yan up against Pereira, it only leads me to believe that Yan is going to do the same thing to Alex that he did to Izzy. And what do they always say? Yan's got the best leg kick defense in the game, one of them. So, and that's Pereira's bread and butter, is those leg kicks with no wind up, and somehow he still's got power into it. So it's a good fight. But for the purpose of us being able to see Israel Adesanya fight at 205 for the belt, potentially against Pereira. I know that's a large order because Pereira would have to beat Yan, and then he'd have to turn around and beat Jamal. I think the Jamal matchup is a much more favorable one than Yan. So I'm going to watch it. I'm excited, but I think it's a great way to ruin any chances of a trilogy match for the belt and for Izzy to be able to go up and become double champ. I do also want to talk about, this is probably going to be the last thing I hit on, just kind of keep this episode a little quick, is Oliveira coming back and finishing Beneil Dariush in the first round. Makes you really, it's a nice, sharp reminder of how good Oliveira is. And it's an interesting thing because we all tend to forget, he got dominated so badly by Islam in the title fight that it made you kind of be like, okay, yeah, that's right. I forgot Oliveira's gotten finished quite a few times. I believe he's been submitted now 9 times. So we all kind of forget and we just go, okay, yeah, Charles is amazing. He had that quick run at lightweight where he took out, Dustin and Chandler and Gaethje, and it was insanely impressive. But, it kind of makes sense. He's not like the tip top. He's just below it. And then you see him fight Beneil, who was on, a 8-fight win streak, and had Beneil won, they could not deny that man a title shot. And Oliveira puts it on him, dude. And Oliveira was speaking so confidently before the fight and the whole build-up. And that's nothing new for a fighter trying to regain their confidence, get back on the win streak. But I did see Beneil winning that fight. I thought that, he's going on a 8-fight win streak. This would have been 9. So I kind of thought he had the momentum on his side, but Charles stamped that out real quick. It wasn't even competitive. There's 2 head kicks that really did him in. Then he TKO'd him on the ground. I saw Beneil come out and do an interview, I think with Ariel, talking about he already came back to watch the fight. I think that's good because a lot of these fighters, because the emotional and physical turmoil they went through to a devastating loss, especially one leading up to a title fight, they kind of don't want to rewatch it. I thought it was good news that Beneil had the courage to go back and rewatch it. That being said, that dude's probably not going to touch a title fight anytime soon. I think that his lack of a fan base works against him in that department. So that's a shame because I wanted to see Beneil fight Islam. I thought that was a great fight. And it makes you wonder, as far as Oliveira goes, as amazing as Oliveira is, we saw that fight with Islam. It wasn't even close to competitive, and I don't see it being any more competitive than it was the first time. So all of these divisions right now are at a very interesting point, are they not? Because you have these guys who are right at the tip top, and they've lost to the champ, and now it's like, where do we go from here? I know a lot of people online were talking about not wanting to see the Charles rematch with Islam, but instead seeing the Islam rematch with Volk. I'm totally a believer in that. I would love to see Volk fight again because I did think in the initial moments after the fight versus Islam, when he moved up to fight for the belt, I did think that he edged Islam. I mean, you saw Islam get knocked down in the 5th. But at the same time, Dana said that Volk's got to go back down to 145, and he's going to be fighting Yair Rodriguez. Amazing fight. It's incredible. You do have to favor Volk, but at the same time, dude, you never know what happens with Yair. That dude's crazy. The only faults we can ever say about Yair are that he is very quiet, hidden in the background, and he fights rather inconsistently. But when he does fight, man, probably one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. So should Volk get past Yair, and should Islam get past, I guess they're going to go with the Oliveira rematch is what Dana was saying, then I guess that leads to believe the rematch will happen after that. Wrapping up, you do have the BMF fight coming up with Dustin and Justin. I meant to touch on that a moment ago, speaking on the need for UFC to have a title fight at the top. So now they don't have a champion for that card, so now they put the BMF belt up for Dustin and Justin. I'm not going to dive too much into the BMF belt. I think it's a bit silly, but at the same time, it's giving these guys more opportunity. And on top, because I believe they get pay-per-view points for the winner of the belt if they ever put it up for defense. I could be wrong about that, but I heard speculation about pay-per-view points still being attached to that. And if you are going to do a BMF fight, it only leads you to believe that Dustin and Justin would be the best people for that. So a lot of crazy things going on in the UFC. I wouldn't say that it is the best UFC year in recent memory. It started off with a bang, and then it's kind of fizzling out a little bit. Now that July 8th card coming up, that one is a banger. I'm so excited for that. That's one of those ones that I was speaking of where I'm willing to be patient for it because you have the entire main card fire, and I think at least half of the prelims are all going to be great fights. So I'm going to go back and rewatch this ESPN card from last night, the ones that I missed. And there's so much going on in the UFC world, and I just love hopping on here talking about it, getting people's reactions and opinions on it, and just following the sport. It's the only sport I watch. It's the only one I care to watch. It's one of my favorite things in this world. Nothing is more exciting than watching UFC, in my opinion. I did see that Yoel Romero lost his title fight. He was acting like an absolute goober. If you guys saw him like stumbling around on purpose, trying to act hurt. It's another one of those guys who got so close to the belt, but falls just short. I think you could probably attribute that largely to his age and getting into the UFC at such a late age. But I thought that was a goofy performance. Truthfully, I just saw the highlights. I don't really tend to watch Bellator too much, mainly because it sometimes conflicts with the UFC schedule, and also I end up kind of just being interested if it's like a former UFC fighter going over to Bellator. I missed that one, but I did see that he lost in dominant fashion, but didn't get finished. If you guys have any topics as far as UFC goes that you want to talk about, feel free to email me at mixedmartianartsshow@gmail.com. Any opinions, topics, questions that you'd like featured on the show, I'd love to have them. And we're going to be posting these Monday. I'm going to do my best to stick to a Monday, Wednesday, Friday release schedule. And as you know now, we are splitting them up. So the UAP episodes are going to be their own, the World War III episodes are going to be their own, and the UFC segments are going to be their own. That's because I don't believe there's all that many people in the world that care about all three. I don't want people to have to sit through some long 45-minute ordeal about a topic they don't care about just so that they can get to the UFC news, or just so they could tune into the geopolitical stuff and they don't care one bit about UFC. So doing my best to split those up. When I hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, whenever that may happen, I'm going to be able to do these live chats. And at that point, we'll probably merge them just for the ability for people to hop on and talk about whatever they want. I'm having a blast doing these, only 3 episodes in, but I love it. I've been getting some good feedback. Topics, questions, anything like that, you could also DM them to me on Instagram at Austin Michael Music. But the Gmail is a good thing because you guys can send me videos and video segments, questions, and I tend to check the Gmail pretty often. So this should be out Monday morning. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Love talking UFC news. There's a lot more to come. I'm going to do my best to put out that schedule Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We'll see how it happens, but so far it's working out. I am going to be having guests on for all those segments, some UFC guests, some UAP guests, and some geopolitical people that I like talking to. That's to come. I still have to get a little studio set up to be able to do that and get another mic, et cetera, but it will be coming. I appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. You'll see this out Monday. Thank you guys for supporting me. Please, if you did like the show, subscribe on anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you see me on YouTube, do me a favor and just hit the subscribe button. I'm just doing this for fun. Don't really have any plans or goals with it, but I do really enjoy doing it, and I would love to hit 1,000 subs so that we can start to do live chats and kind of have a live-to-live, a live person-to-person interaction. So I appreciate you guys. Hope you all have a good Sunday, and we will be back with another episode on Wednesday. Take it easy, y'all.